The podcast is Going to the Conspiracy, featuring Auckland's Josh Addison and Bucharest's Dr. Matthew R. X. Dentith.
Hello, you're listening to the podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. I'm Josh Addison, and back from travels abroad, bringing spices and presents for all of us, I assume, it's Dr. Matthew R. X. Dentith.
Hello.
And when I say you're back, he's back to Romania, not back here to New Zealand, but he's back to his current temporary abode, anyway.
It's true, although we'll be back in Aotearoa, New Zealand in less than 2 months.
Exciting.
I know. Be able to record in person. What an exciting experience that will be.
Sounds like nonsense to me, the very idea of it. Can't be done, Matthew. Can't be done.
We managed to do it for several years.
That's a communist lie. So what have you been doing for the last 2 weeks then? Fill us in.
Well, spent time in Roma, visiting the Colosseum and the Old City, as well as popping into the Vatican to find out about those gay orgies. They weren't going on at the time that we were there. They had occurred just the night before. Then spent some time in Firenze, looking at all the historic sites from the Assassin's Creed 2 series of games, and then most of a week in Venice, which was spent scouring the streets trying to find masks that I can wear to amuse the children when I get home. My Plague Doctor mask will be the hit of playgrounds everywhere, as long as I am giving out the plague.
And I understand that at some point in the process you managed to age another year?
I did try to fit in a bit of aging whilst I was away, but I'm not entirely sure it stuck.
I don't know, you don't look much older. You only look about 2 weeks older, I have to say.
Well, I tried, Josh. I know on birthdays it is customary to flick the dial, turn the notch of it, and age a year, and yet I just don't seem to be able to make it stick. Admittedly, it might be my beauty regime of rubbing the fat of virgin children into my pores every morning to maintain my Dorian Gray aspect, but I just can't make the aging stick.
Oh well, I'll say a provisional happy birthday anyway, even though I'm doubtful that any birthday has occurred, or indeed has ever occurred, quite frankly. But we'll just take it as read, I suppose. We'll call you a 40-year-old human being, and you'll just have to fake it till you make it, I guess.
It's true. One day I'll make this aging work, but not today.
Not
today. This week, not this year.
No. So, we have news, but before we have news, we have news. I understand there's been more patronage developments.
Yes, so Chris Smith has become what we might want to call a super patron, if we indeed had ranks of patrons, because they have upped their pledge, and we thank them for that. And an interesting fact, both of my Irish great-great-grandfather and great-grandmother were called Chris Smith. Coincidence? I don't think so. So thank you very much to my great-great-grandmother and great-great-grandfather for coming back to life and pledging more money to this podcast. I hope I'm doing the family proud.
Well, Chris Smith, whoever you are and wherever you are, I believe...
Or whenever you're from.
Whenever you are. I'm fairly certain the terms of our Patreon means you now own both of our mortal souls, I think. Hang on, Matthew, you've frozen. This is a little bit odd.
Down from your end whatsoever.
There we go, you're back. No?
Noise?
Yes?
No, you're back now.
You just suddenly completely froze. There was no distortion, there was no strange voice hijinks going on. You just suddenly froze in place as though struck by the sudden realization of your own aging.
Yeah, and now we've got a lot of noise on the line. This is really quite bizarre. Let me just check to see if there's anything which might be potentially using up bandwidth. No.
The line seems okay at my end. What will we do, Matthew, when you're back in the company and we don't have this sort of wacky hijinks to entertain ourselves, trying to sort out exactly what's wrong with our respective internet connections and
I just want to point
quality's
out
gone rubbish?
I just want to point out that either due to distortion or mispronunciation. Rather than saying back in the country, you said back in the company, which makes it sound as if we actually work for some sinister corporation, and I've been sent overseas on a special mission.
Yes. And your point is?
We're not meant to talk about that?
Oh, right, sorry. Then yes, whatever it is I did say, I can't be bothered stopping recording, going back, rewinding, and finding out what it was I actually said, but let's assume it was country.
Yeah, and
Anyway,
now,
is everything
now we
working?
have a new, well, no, so now we have a new issue. We are peaking like nothing on Earth. So give me some levels.
Hello, my name's Josh Edison. I'm sitting
Yeah,
here in
you
Auckland.
you are now suddenly very, very loud. I have
Well, it's
no
been
idea
said.
what's gone on.
It's been said of me in the
Let's.
past.
All right, actually, I've just done the usual thing. So something about this connection has gone very, very wonky. Right, talk to me again.
Hello, my name's Josh Edison. I'm sitting here in Auckland, New Zealand on a slightly rainy night. It was supposed to be really stormy today, actually, and tomorrow, but so far it has not been. Which is probably good because
I'm
the last
told
time...
actually in the CBD it has been stormy.
Oh, maybe it has. I guess it hasn't got out to me yet. But last time we recorded this podcast on a stormy night, I came out the next day and found that half my fence had fallen over. Well, when I say half, I mean a small section
You
of my
came out
fence
the
had
next
fallen
day.
over.
That was very exciting for you.
Then I went straight back in. Didn't take, unfortunately.
Just like my aging.
Maybe next time, yes.
This section is going to be very fun to edit around.
Yes, you can edit it all out. I'm of the cinema verite type that just likes to leave everything in, largely because it's much more jarring when you edit video than
And
when you
also
just edit
because you're
sound.
lazy.
And I'm a little bit lazy too. That's actually true.
Well, let us not tempt fate any longer.
Yes, let's
Let
just
us now
crack
move
on
on
quickly.
to the news and hope that these faults are going to be left behind and not a recurrent issue with this particular episode of the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy.
Let's do that.
Breaking conspiracy theories in the news.
So news, it's been 2 weeks. 2 weeks since we actually did an episode, and that damn world continues on eventuating and producing newsworthy items. So we probably have a bit to catch up on. Where should we start? I guess at the start of our list.
Indeed,
item.
I always think that's the best way to go because otherwise we miss items
Yeah,
out.
we do that when we try to be clever and jump around and group them according to themes or something. No, let's just keep it in what I assume is chronological order that we jotted them down. And the first one being that a fellow called Eric Nelson, who is a documentarian, he produced Werner Herzog's documentary Grizzly Man, which if you hadn't heard of that one, was about an interesting individual who what was his deal? He hung around in a national park and studied the bears and thought he sort of had a bit of a connection with them and thought it was his job to protect them from everyone until he ended up getting eaten by one. So the man who is executive produced that documentary...
I'd say that is a wonderful spoiler for a documentary. Lovely story about a man who likes to look after bears, then gets eaten by one.
Well, I'm pretty sure the revelation that he was eaten by one happens fairly early on, because that's the point of it. Nevertheless,
That's the hook. The hook.
Nevertheless, a new documentary called A Grey State. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because you're remembering from a few episodes when we talked about the man David Crowley, who died a few years ago while working on a film of his own called Grey State, which started off as a project to make a sort of a fictional film about an America living in a sort of police state where the government's sort of established this police state and is now in the process of manufacturing discord so they have an excuse to clamp down further. And then he ended up changing that into an actual documentary about how America is becoming a police state or something. We don't know, though, because it never got finished, because he seemingly killed both himself and his wife and daughter, which has then since been claimed by various alt-right types that it was all a conspiracy and he was killed by the government for knowing too much and so on and so forth. So they're now making a documentary about him, which apparently has been helped by the fact that this guy that Mr. Crowley documented pretty much his entire life. They supposedly had 13,000, I think, still photographs, hours upon hours of footage he shot of himself talking about things and working on his documentary and espousing his views and so on. And apparently, because the article that we originally read about this guy talked about how supposedly his journals and so on showed what a descent into a psychosis of some kind, which it never really elaborated on. Apparently this film shows that a lot more clearly in the copious footage of him, along with interviews with lots of people that he knew. So it's called A Grey State. It's coming out in film festivals and so on. I don't know when it's ever going to be something that you or I can see, but I assume it'll be available in some format or another eventually, so it'll be interesting to see when that comes out.
Indeed it will. It should be quite fascinating to see actual documentarian footage by David Crowley about David Crowley.
Apparently he was a good filmmaker. You know, the stuff he shot and so on was very professional and of high quality. But yes, there's just apparently just mountains and mountains of footage that they're able to use to so suppose I've read interviews and they say they sort of shy away from making any conclusions really as to exactly why he did it and exactly what went wrong, but they just sort of it's just sort of an interesting portrayal of a man. But anyway,
do you know what else there are mountains and mountains of? Smuggled ancient Iraqi artifacts being brought into the country being the US, by a Christian lobby group.
Excellent segue there, Matthew. Yes, Hobby Lobby, which, apart from having a delightful name, I understand it's like a chain of sort of craft supply stores, sort of industrial scrapbooking.
Because when you think craft supplies, you think cuneiform tablets.
Yes, I mean, Hobby Lobby, they were in the news a while ago because apparently their owners have fairly pronounced Christian values and took offence at the government introduced health insurance provisions which would have required them to cover either the morning after pill or contraceptive pills or something, which were against their values, and so they fought bitterly against having to comply with these health insurance laws. But yeah, now it turns out they've been smuggling ancient Iraqi artifacts out of Iraq and into America. The stuff that the government's gone after them for happened between 2009 and 2011, although I've heard allegations that it went on further than that as well. But yeah, so they've been paying money, because I think it was in the name of sort of setting up some sort of a biblical museum or something. I think they wanted these artifacts from biblical times or something, but they've been acquiring them in somewhat dodgy methods, smuggled into America via the United Arab Emirates and Israel. It's some of them marked as being tile samples on the customs declaration, which I suppose they were clay tiles.
Tile
of some
samples
kind.
from 3,000 years ago.
Yes,
Very
so
old stock.
So yes, it's all been a little bit dodgy conspiratorial goings on, and as people have had a little fun in pointing out that despite their devout Christian values, it's almost certain that at least some of the money they've been paying for these illegal things will have been funneled into the likes of ISIS and other terrorist organisations in the Middle East. But
yes, and
that's just a bit of schadenfreude there.
Those organisations have been using illicit trading in ancient goods as a way of funneling money back to their organisations. So a Christian conservative group has been involved in funding an Islamic conservative group, which on one level seems slightly odd, and yet on another level they do kind of share some of the same values.
Anyway, tell me, has been going on, or has not been going on Mars?
Well, one Robert David Steele appeared on one of the Alex Jones shows with Alex Jones to claim that NASA has been running a child slave colony on Mars.
NASA, I assume, said, "Yep, you've got us. The jig is up. We've been doing it for decades." I'm guessing that's what happened.
Strange enough, no. NASA has denied running a child slave colony on Mars and claimed the idea is in fact ridiculous.
Oh, but didn't our good mate Andy Bishago have copious experience on Mars with young Barry Obama.
See, here things get complex because Bishago's Mars colony seems different from Robert David Steele's Mars colony because Bishago didn't claim these children were kidnapped for space labor and also murdered for their blood and bone marrow.
So he was on a different colony.
Yes, it does suggest that there's more than one colony
Right.
on Mars. And maybe this is the trick. Maybe there is a NASA colony on Mars. And Robert David Steele has simply got information about the wrong one, thus allowing NASA to deny the existence of the colony because he's got the details wrong.
Plausible
Maybe if Robert David
deniability.
Steele looked into Andy Basiago's claims about the time portal and teleportation technology that allows people to get to Mars, NASA have to go, oh, no, sorry, actually you got us this time. That one's real.
Now,
But yes, NASA is now denying that they're running a slave colony on Mars, like they deny that the moon landing was hoaxed. NASA, full of denialists.
they just can't stop denying things.
It actually sounds like it should be a song from the 80s. I can't stop denying things.
I would dance to that. Well, no, I wouldn't, obviously, because
No,
I've
you've
danced to
never
anything.
danced to anything, Joshua.
I would listen to that.
You would, and you'd put it on your Spotify playlist.
If I had one.
Yes, if only I had one as well.
I don't. I occasionally use Spotify, but it's. I think it goes in the same pile as Snapchat as being something that I'm slightly too old to get the point of. I know it exists. I've used it briefly. Don't get it.
I use Snapchat.
Is it
And I'm
just?
only slightly younger than you.
Is it just about the filters? Is it just about making funny face pictures of yourself looking like a dog or with a crown on your head or a princess?
No, basically Snapchat's like WhatsApp and the like. It happens to be a messaging client which people use depending on which one they started off with, and then on occasion people like to use the filters because they're actually quite funny, especially the ones in real time, which give you the ability to breathe fire, or whenever you open your mouth, carrots fly into them. That's a fun fact.
Oh, okay, I might have to fire it up again, give it a proper go. Anyway, returning to planet Earth.
And to a much more serious and not particularly funny
yes,
matter.
a much less flippant topic. Unfortunately, the Grenfell apartment complex fire, which happened, is it a month ago now? It's been a little while now.
About that.
So it wasn't a good look for all involved. Aside from the tragedy, people have pointed out how preventable the whole thing seems to be, and how the extent of the fire seems to have been due to the fact that it was clad in flammable materials, which it really shouldn't have allowed to have been done, but the loosening of regulations and lack of inspections and all that stuff seem to have contributed to it. But where things have been becoming sort of openly conspiratorial is now people are claiming that there's some sort of a cover-up to hide the true death toll of the fire. I think we're sort of the figures that I've heard of sort of the estimated deaths and the death tolls that the council and the police have been talking about seem to be fairly widely discrepant. I assume it's a result of sort of the larger numbers, which are over 100 dead, seem to be a result of people basically going through everyone who is known to have lived in the apartment complex and counting how many of them we can no longer find trace of, whereas the official statistics seem to be, here is a person who was very definitely, in a hospital or in a morgue, and we have an official record of. But the council definitely are being accused of trying to downplay the extent of this tragedy by hiding the true number of the dead. Which I guess sounds kind of plausible, really, as a sort of face-saving manoeuvre, given that the council are very much getting it in the neck as to some in terms of culpability for the event happening in the first place.
And
oh, he's done it again. He's frozen in mid-speech, just like that. It's quite Max Headroom, actually. Unfortunately, and this time he's frozen just as he started saying something, so now his face is in a really wacky position, whereas last time I was the one who was talking. Oh, dear. Oh. Okay, the call's dead. Shall we ring back again? Let's see what's going to happen. Goodness
Are
me.
you back?
I am back.
No, you just completely disappeared there.
And you just completely freeze-framed. Unfortunately, as you were talking, so you kind of had the full sort of mouth half open, eyes half closed thing.
Well, that's the point where you put an animation of a carrot going into my mouth to reference.
Yes, maybe I'll have to do that. Anyway, okay, so something seems to be going
basically,
dodgy with our connection, so we better crack on.
I said, as is the government of the day, take blah 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 blah, and that's the point where it stopped for me.
Yes, that was about where we stopped hearing you. So
brilliant. So I'll just click on to record. If I can make the recording button reappear, I can.
The entire time.
Dun dun dun. Ooh, burpee. And let's get back to it.
Right. So yes, I mean it's overtly conspiratorial now, and the conspiracy seems to have some amount of plausibility to it, if only in terms of, governments, councils like to save face.
Yes, there is a vested interest here in, if not downplaying the tragedy, downplaying the consequences of the tragedy in order to not make it look as bad as it actually was, and thus somehow through that particular mechanism reduce the need for the government to respond.
So yes, I'm guessing there will be years and years of investigations and inquests and so on, so there's probably not much more to say now, but there will doubtless be more to say in the future. So from something depressing to something a little more flippant, I suppose. Do you remember the Chinese road-straddling bus?
I have to say those words mean nothing to me, so maybe a quick pre-say about the Chinese road-straddling bus.
It was a thing that went around a little while ago, probably a year or two ago now, maybe. There was sort of a photo going around on the internet of look what's happening in China. They've got this as a way of combating traffic and so on. They have this magical road-straddling bus, and so it was like a bus. It looked kind of like the from front on, it looked like the things from Tron that had the long legs. What were they called?
Oh, see, now that you're mentioning Tron, I'm going, yes, I do remember an image of a kind of reddish bus that looked like it had special legs that could go along the road.
So it was a bus that had a sort of a bus body, but then it was on these sort of quite long sort of legs, essentially. With wheels on the bottom, and so that gave a big enough space underneath the body of the bus to fit two cars underneath it. So the idea would be that this bus drove along the outside of the road, allowing traffic to pass underneath it. And this was hailed as this clever innovation that was going to solve China's traffic problems or something. And unfortunately, I mean, you looked at the photo and said, well, that does seem quite clever, but what happens the first time it turns a corner? Because you could imagine, you could sort of see, going straight ahead, there was enough room for two cars to be side by side in two lanes. But as soon as it turned, and suddenly the car on the outside is going on a different curve from the one on the inside, and so on and so forth, it did look a little bit dodgy. And it turns out there's a reason why it looked a little bit dodgy, is because it was a little bit dodgy. 32 people, I think, have now been arrested for fraud in connection with the road-straddling bus. Admitting that basically the whole thing was an investment scam. The bus itself did exist, but it ran on sort of, the wheels were on tracks that were on a very short, straight piece of road. It was purely a prototype, and apparently there was never any intention to actually make it into a real thing, and the whole thing was just kind of a scam to get people to invest millions of dollars into it. And then for them to say, oh, well, it turns out the whole thing's flopped, oh well, and run off with the money. So there you go. So I think we can legitimately call it a criminal conspiracy.
Yeah. People in the business world always up to their criminal conspiratorial hijinks. Who would believe it?
Right, you do one now, Matthew. What do you got
for
me?
People may well be aware that there was a G20 meeting last week. And at that meeting, Trump and Putin had a sit-down chat, which made the news because Trump asked Putin, did you hack our elections? And Putin went, no, of course I didn't hack the elections. And then one of the immediate results of this conversation was Trump and Putin announcing they were going to form a joint security task force to stop the hacking of elections in America in the future. Something which was shut down very quickly by American officials going, no, we're not going to trust the people who hacked the election to protect us from future hacking of the election. That just sounds stupid. But what didn't come out was that Trump and Putin apparently had a second G20 meeting, which ran anywhere from about 20 minutes to an hour, depending on who's reporting on the length of the meeting, in which Trump and Putin had a long conversation, and there was no other American official involved, only a Russian interpreter. And this is making people somewhat uneasy and suspicious, because without there being a second American official at the conversation, all we have is Trump's word that it was a friendly chat and no policy discussions were going on at that particular point in time. And given the Trump campaign and the Trump presidency, as we will see in the next part of the episode, has troubling ties to Russia, this is simply not a good look for the 45th president at this particular point in time.
No, I mean, even the official meeting, I don't really understand how they could spin that sort of a rationale, saying, here's the it's the country that was accused of hacking them, so why would they want them to be involved in any anti-hacking efforts? And why would they want them involved anyway? Why would you turn to a foreign power? Like I could almost understand if it was we're going to form a joint task force to sort of to investigate vote election tampering, sort of all over the world, or sort of as a general thing, or across both of our countries. But simply saying we're going to organise with this foreign country to avoid election tampering in our country. Even if it wasn't a country that had already had allegations made against it, the whole thing seems like quite a dodgy plan. And then adding on, yes, secret other meetings. So, I mean, Trump said nothing of substance. He's just said it was just a chat and nothing came of it.
Well, he's claiming that the media's interest in the second meeting is sick, and also claims it's fake news. Because, yes, it was true that the second meeting took place at a sit-down dinner organised by Angela Merkel, but the fact that then Trump had a long conversation with Vladimir Putin at that sit-down meal, apparently to the unease and disquiet of the other attendees, is in fact newsworthy, no matter what the president would like us to think.
Well, I'm just going to come out and say it. I got you to do that one because I was stalling for time, because my Evernote crashed again and I've just been booting it up again. Although it's just come online again now, so I could have just kept my mouth shut and you never would have known. So I see, looking at my perfectly functional version of Evernote that works completely and has never gone wrong before, that the next item on our list is a follow-up to the fun episode we had a while ago when we were talking about conspiracies in the movie world, about people taking credit for things they didn't do or refusing credit for things they did do. And one of those things was who exactly it was who directed the film Poltergeist. Was it Tobe Hooper, the man who has the directorial credit, or was it Steven Spielberg, the man who was sort of behind it and I think wanted to direct it but couldn't because he was on other projects and so on and so forth? So more ammunition in that argument has come out recently, I understand.
Yes, so there was a podcast recently, and I've now completely forgotten which of two podcasts it actually was. So I'm just going to be agnostic now as to which podcast it actually originally came from, where they were talking with a camera operator on the mover. It
was the podcast. The podcast was Shockwaves, which I know because
excellent.
I looked up the article on the perfectly functional instance of Evernote that's running on my tablet here, which works like a charm, always, in all circumstances, as you were.
Excellent. I'm glad
Shockwaves.
that worked out for you. So yes, the podcast was Shockwaves, and John Leonetti, a camera operator on the movie. I can't say movie. I keep on saying mover. A camera operator on the mover. A camera operator on the movie whose
Yes.
brother was also the DOP, has said, look, no offense to Tobe Hooper, but Spielberg was the person who was actually directing that film. Yes, on occasion, Spielberg would leave the room and allow Tobe to have some creative control, but basically, as the camera operator and brother to the DOP, it's quite clear who the real director was, Steven Spielberg.
So I forget, was it were there some industry rules that meant Spielberg couldn't direct it officially, or was it simply that he wasn't sort of supposed to be directing
No,
it?
he couldn't direct
Hmm.
it at the time due to commitments to other films. So
Right.
there was a limit as to how many films he could do.
Yes, so there we go. So there was actual motivation. So if this is true, and there has been more and more claims that it is true, we can see there would be motivation for him to cover up the extent of his involvement, rather than be found in contravention of industry rules. It all makes sense,
Now,
Matthew.
admittedly, no one seems to have approached Spielberg on this new revelation. Spielberg, as we discussed in the previous episode, at the time dismissed the rumors he was the real director and said no, Tobe Hooper was the real control on the set at the time. But having a camera operator on the movie and the brother of the DOP go, no, actually it was Spielberg, is fairly good evidence that there's something more to the story than the official explanation provides us at this particular point in time.
Righto. Well, I see once again, consulting the always faithful, never lying Evernote, we've come to the end of our news list. So we better get on to the main body of the episode, I guess. I've not made much of a secret of the fact that I'm sick of talking about the Trump people, and so was loath to discuss this topic, but I really don't see how we can avoid it, because it has been the most significant conspiracy-related happening of the last 2 weeks. So perhaps I should be less bullish about the whole thing and just take it on the chin and do, because a man's got to do what a man's got to do, and any other sort of person also has to do what they have to do. It's kind of a tautology, really. I'm rambling now because I'm still trying to put the whole thing off, but I can't, I shouldn't, and I mustn't, and I won't. Let's go talk about the main thing.
So, Josh is really reluctant to talk about this. Even mentioning the name Donald Trump, regardless of whether we append senior or junior, makes his face drop, his shoulders slump, and a sigh emanate from all of his orifices. So, in order to prevent Josh from suffering an existential meltdown, causing him to rip his clothes off and cry, "Why are we here?" I thought a quick précis of what has just happened over the last week might be appropriate. So, President Trump's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., was promised damaging information about Hillary Clinton before agreeing to meet with a Kremlin-connected Russian lawyer back in June 2016. The meeting was brokered by Rob Goldstein. No, I'll try that again, because it's not Goldstein at all. I accidentally made him Jewish. The meeting was brokered by Rob Goldstone, a publicist and former British tabloid reporter who emailed Trump Jr. with details about the meeting, an email to which Trump Jr. replied, "If that's what you say, I love it, especially later in the summer." So, Trump Jr., along with at least Paul J. Manafort and Jared Kushner, met with one Natalia Veselnitskaya a mere 2 weeks after Trump Sr. clinched the Republican nomination for president. Now, where the story gets strange is in the details of what was discussed at the meeting. Trump Jr. took the meeting precisely because he was promised compromising information on Clinton, but Veselnitskaya wanted to talk about the Magnitsky Act, which blacklisted suspected Russian human rights abusers and led to the Kremlin suspending the adoption of Russian children by Americans. Junior wanted dirt. Veselnitskaya wanted a law change, and it seems neither side was satisfied, and the meeting came to an abrupt end. So how did information about this meeting come about? Well, in part it came about because Mr. Kushner amended his security clearance form not once, but twice, adding in meetings with about 100 foreign agents he had somehow failed to mention when he first applied for his security clearance. How clumsy. But this means that not only do we have a meeting between a Trump and someone affiliated with the Kremlin, but we have a meeting which was predicated on the notion that the Trump would get compromising information from a foreign power about a political opponent. Now, whether this is evidence of collusion or treason is of course up to debate, but the fact remains that this is evidence of a closer connection between the Trump campaign and Russia than the president would like people to believe. President Trump, of course, denies being told anything about the meeting, but is confident it was just business as usual.
Indeed. Whereas the only notes I had for the content of this episode were Donald Trump Jr. met with the Russians, then denied it, then released emails confirming it, then up was down and black was white, and all that is good and pure in the world was fired directly into the heart of the sun. The end. It has
and
been
that ends our discussion of this topic. Thank you for listening to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. We'll be back next week.
No, yes, it was a weird thing. It was because what was it? It was the New York Times, wasn't it? Was just about to release an article talking about all this, and so Donald Trump tried to preempt this by releasing the emails already, which I don't see how that...
3 pages of the emails, which was interesting because, of course, there were 4 pages of emails, and it's the last page that had all the really juicy information.
So, yeah, it was a little bit odd to begin with. And then, yeah, it's been the usual business of stories that constantly change and people insisting things are a big deal or not a big deal, and the content of actually what went on changing and being disputed and so on and so on and so on. So where do we go? I guess the first question is why does this matter? Some people met, they wanted stuff from each other. I mean, that's fairly standard politicking, isn't it?
Well, yes. So there seems to be a distinction here between what would be acceptable in the world of business, which the Trumps come from, and what is acceptable in the world of politics, a realm the Trumps have entered into. Because if you're dealing with a business rival, then of course you get information from any source possible. There may be ethics issues as to whether it's appropriate to get information from a particular person, but it's all considered above board if you're getting dirt on a competitor that you can then use to your own competitive advantage. But when it comes to politics, there's a distinction between getting dirt on a political opponent from people within your political system and getting dirt on a political opponent from a foreign power, which of course might have a vested interest in giving you dirt because you might be a more sympathetic leader towards that foreign power should you actually take the reins of government. So on one level, yes, this just seems like business as usual, but of course actually we're talking here about politics, and getting information from a foreign power with vested interests in the running of your country, actually makes this a much bigger deal than the Trumps would like us to believe.
And there are laws of some kind, aren't there, about foreign countries not being allowed to have any influence on American elections. I forget the exact specifics of it, isn't it? Because people in other countries are allowed to venture an opinion about who they think the superior candidate would be, for instance, but they take a much dimmer view of people outside America actually trying to influence what goes on
or meddle in an election.
Yes.
So digging dirt on a political rival is not illegal in the US, but obtaining a benefit with the help of a foreign government is. And so in this particular case, the Trumps were digging for dirt on a political rival, but they were using a foreign government, or at least accepting help from a foreign government to do it, and that is obtaining a benefit, and that is a legally questionable, and many people saying quite straightforwardly illegal act that Donald Trump Jr. has engaged in.
I suppose some people, though, are disputing whether or not they actually received a benefit, given that the meetings apparently came to naught. But then the counter to that is, well, they didn't know they were going to come to naught. They quite deliberately, were offered dirt from an agent of a foreign power and said, "Yep, I'm interested." So that is possibly bad enough as it stands. But these emails, though, so everybody thought it was a little bit weird and a strange sort of an own goal for Trump Jr. to release the emails proving the allegations that were about to be made against him. But then, as you say, there was this missing fourth page. So do we know what the fourth page of the email was, or has it just been implied?
Yes, no, the fourth page has leaked, and it is the fourth page that shows that Goldstone, when he presented details of the meeting, presented Veselnitskaya as a Russian government attorney. So it wasn't simply a Russian who has information on Hillary Clinton. It was a Russian government attorney, someone working for the Russian government. And also, Goldstone states that the Russian government wants to help Donald Trump Sr. win against Hillary Clinton in the presidential campaign. So even if it turns out that Veselnitskaya wasn't aware she was being presented in this way, Donald Trump Jr. took the meeting on the notion he'd be meeting with a member of the Russian government, or at least someone closely affiliated with them, who would be using information from the Russian government to help Trump Sr. get a benefit over Clinton in the upcoming presidential race.
And I mean, one of the other things that I recall people disputing and disagreeing over was exactly who knew what and when and so on. And Trump Jr. initially tried to claim that it was just him and not anyone else. And then people pointed out, hang on, Manafort and Kushner, they're like copied in as recipients of this email, aren't they? So how can you be claiming they didn't know anything about it?
Because Kushner actually put it down as, oh, by the way, I kind of forgot, I met with a Russian lawyer back in June. Probably should have put that on the security form. I'll just amend that form now so that she's listed there as someone I've had contact with in the past.
And so, yes, the number of people who are actually involved in this meeting has just grown and grown and grown. What's it at now? Eight people there?
Yeah.
So have we got Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort, the lawyer herself, Ms. Veselnitskaya, this Rob Goldstone fellow, this Rinat Akhmetshin, who, have we talked about him before, or...?
No, he's a name which has come up in this discussion, and is now a person of interest to many people around the world. So Akhmetshin is a Russian immigrant. He's a former Soviet military counterintelligence agent and a naturalized US citizen for over 10 years, and basically has been involved in trying to get the Magnitsky Act repealed to allow Russian adoptions to occur in America once again. But he told the Associated Press that Veselnitskaya informed Trump Jr. she had details of possible illicit funds being funneled to the Democratic National Committee. So he's not helping the story here, and that he's claiming, oh no, one of the discussions we had was Veselnitskaya giving Trump Jr. information that would help his father's campaign.
Because yes, again, another one of the things that people disputed and argued over was the exact content of the meetings. Because at some point they did try to claim that no, it was just about this adoption law, wasn't it? The idea of dirt on Clinton.
So Trump Jr. has always admitted thus far he took the meeting because he wanted to get dirt. He doesn't seem to think there's anything wrong with getting dirt from a member of the Russian government. And he was disappointed that when the meeting occurred, there was so much focus on American adoption of Russian children that they ended the meeting early and went away, which is why he thought the meeting really wasn't worth talking about, because he didn't get the dirt he wanted. If he'd got the dirt he wanted, maybe this would be a major story, but he didn't get the dirt, so it shouldn't be. But now more details are coming out that maybe slightly more than Russian adoptions were actually discussed at this meeting. And of course, what we don't know is whether there were any follow-up meetings that occurred afterwards.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot we don't know, and so that's why, I mean, this is being investigated. Is it part of the investigation that's already been ongoing into Russia's or the Trump's administration's ties with Russia, or is it a new thing altogether?
Well, it's going to be part of the existing investigation because Vitornetskaya has claimed that she'd be willing to testify in the Senate as to what happened at that meeting. And now all of Trump's sons are saying they're willing to testify as to what happened in the meeting at the time. So even though it started off as a rather minor story, which irritated President Trump, it now seems to be part of the mainstream narrative into the investigation between the Trump campaign team and the Russian government.
So, have we reached the point of we'll just have to wait and see what happens? Is there any more that can be said at this time?
Well, I suppose the only thing we can say is why do we keep on finding more and more connections between the Trump campaign team and the Russians? Because Donald Trump keeps on going, this is fake news. There's no evidence of collusion. And whilst there's no smoking gun, so there's no one document which shows that the Trump campaign team got a direct benefit from the Russian government which swung them the election, there is now enough information circling which indicates that the ties between Trump and Russia are so close that it would seem odd now not to think that there was some benefit they got from this connection. And when I was thinking about this episode last night, when I was writing up notes for it, I was thinking about the kind of arguments that Holocaust deniers put forward for claiming, well, we can't actually make the claim that the Nazis actually engaged in the Holocaust because there's no one single document that you can point to which goes, I, Adolf Hitler, authorized the extermination of the Jewish people under a program called the Final Solution. All you've got are a host of different documents with different names, which indicate there were various projects going on at any particular point in time. So whilst there's no smoking gun or single authored text that says this is the conspiracy and this is what we're trying to get, what we do have now is so much corroborating evidence that it seems very hard to deny the claim there is a very suspicious connection between the Russians and Trump, such that it does look as if the Russian government had a vested interest in ensuring that Trump was going to be the winner on the day.
Yes, we've talked about evidence a bit before. We devoted a whole episode to it a while ago, as I recall. And yeah, it is just an interesting thing the way. Yeah, I guess all I can do at this point is agree with you. There is no smoking gun, but there is a big pile of evidence which, while no one piece of it proves anything, the fact that there is such a big pile, it sort of becomes a where there's smoke, there's fire situation, I guess.
Yeah, and so whilst we have to do the wait and see, I can understand people in the US who are going, but this whole wait and see thing could be another year or so of investigations. Meanwhile, there is now good evidence there's someone sitting in the White House who may have got there through illicit means, and that seems like a contravention of the democratic process. What is going to happen next? That's a very good question. I'm quite curious to know how the American Republic can survive in the short term whilst this kind of questioning about the legitimacy of their recent election is going on.
In the medium term, I guess at least, there's the midterm elections next year, isn't there? So if should there be a rout of the Republicans, and I have no idea how likely that actually is, certainly the Supreme Court looks to be in right-wing hands for the foreseeable future. Yeah, if that swings Democrat, then possibly things might move a little more quickly. But
and of course,
I
that's
have
not even
genuinely no
getting
idea.
into the conversation that we haven't had on this podcast, which is all this discussion about voter fraud that Donald Trump keeps going on about.
Well, yes. Despite the fact
Which is
that
the suggestion of a large-scale conspiracy to rort the election, which actually might be evidence of a large-scale conspiracy to rort the midterm elections. So that might be another topic for another time, if indeed you can stomach talking about Donald Trump one more time for old time's sake.
I'm sure I could manage it. And yes, that might be a good thing. We could probably branch out into other issues around voter suppression and claims that have been... Because it's not a new thing, is it, of course? People for
No,
a
people
long
have been
time
talking about
complaining.
voting fraud. I mean, we get discussions about voting fraud going on in Aotearoa, New Zealand all the time. And then the people with the stats come out and go, you do realise it's a really, really small problem. I mean, it's a lot smaller than you actually think. I mean, it's minuscule and tiny.
Yes.
But then again, we also have a much more secure election system because we're not reliant on hanging chads.
Chad. Do they still do that? I think obviously also it doesn't hurt that we're a country of 4.5 million people as opposed to what's the States these days, 300 million or something.
I actually looked into the stats on the States. The States still doesn't have a fairly accurate measure of how many people live there, unlike, say, India, which actually has a really startlingly accurate number of people who live there, and India's population is a lot larger.
It's over 1 billion, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but at any rate, America, whatever its population is, it's a hell of a lot bigger than ours, which means a lot more people and a lot bigger systems, and I guess a lot more room for variation and so on and so forth. But yes,
and
maybe that's something to talk about later.
The state-by-state thing means that each state has a slightly different way of doing things.
Yeah, so well, maybe something to talk about another time. But it's not another time, it's this time, and it appears to be the end of this time.
And the end has been prepared for.
So, I guess we should wrap things up, possibly by saying you've been listening on and off a little bit due to dodgy internet connections. The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. One of the people who's been talking to you during that time has been me, and my name is Josh Addison, and I'm sitting here in Auckland in New Zealand. The other person who's been talking at you has been Dr. Matthew Dentith, who's currently ensconced in Budapest, Romania.
Budapest? I think it's Bucharest.
Bucharest. Why did I say Budapest?
Where is Budapest? Idea.
That's in Hungary? No. Where the hell is Budapest?
No.
It is Hungary?
Yep. Yeah,
okay, there we go. I'm slightly less ignorant of European geography than I thought. Sorry, Bucharest, Romania. Apologies to the people of Bucharest for confusing them with Budapest and vice versa.
Yes, famously, when Michael Jackson came to visit Romania after the fall of Ceausescu, he famously made that blunder, "Hello, Budapest," and they never let him forget it.
Well,
even in death, they won't let him forget it.
I'm in good company then. At any rate...
Yes, you're in the company of Michael Jackson.
Yes. If you wanted to get in touch with Michael Jackson, you'll need some sort of seance equipment or a backhoe and some fairly advanced medical technology. But if you want to get in touch with me, it's a lot easier. You could just shoot me a message on Twitter with the username Monkey Fluids. How about you, Matthew? Do we need to get out the smelling salts and electric cattle prods to get in touch with you, or are there easier ways of doing it?
That never hurts. Well, apart from when the cattle prod hits the wrong part of the body, then it really hurts. But sometimes we like it. But no, you can get in contact with me via my Twitter handle, Conspiracism, or you can find me on the interwebs at episto.org, where largely these days you'll just find recordings of this podcast, but from time to time you'll find reviews of journal articles on conspiracy theories, links to recent articles I've written on conspiracy theories, or just general musings about conspiracy theories. My raison d'etre at the moment is conspiracy theory.
And there'll be a bit more of a blurb at the end of this episode, which will discuss things such as our email address and our various patronage campaigns. If you too could become some sort of a super patron in the manner of our brand new super patron, although I believe if we have two super patrons, they have to duel for supremacy, is it? Something like that. There's some manner of battle to the death. I'm not sure if it's our deaths or theirs.
It is basically a play by email chess game, but the stakes are remarkably high.
Right. Essentially, at some point there can be only one anyway. There's a Highlander vibe to the whole thing at some point, but we'll worry about that when we come to it.
There's a
yeah.
fist fight with butter knives. There's a
butter
Tesla
knife with fist
arcing
knives.
machine. Yeah.
Wolverine.
But you'd always keep
Wolverine
your
style fist
butter knives
knives.
in your fists. Yeah. I mean, how do you butter your toast?
Well, exactly. No, I get Wolverine in. I cover him soundly in butter and then throw bread at him. And
Actually, I believe
eventually it works out.
It actually likes that.
Well, who wouldn't, really? Anyway, so I guess all that remains now is to go out on a song. The song we're going out on this week is called Mail Fraud.
We'll meet. Oh, so you mean a song by someone else?
By a song by someone other than the two of us, unfortunately. It's in fact, in this case, it's by the Minor Thirds.
Josh, it's never the two of us. It's always me doing the singing.
That's true. Yes, almost always. I think there was one time. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Right now, we're going to listen to Mail Fraud by the Minor Thirds, or at least you are. We're going to go and do something else, I imagine. Until next week.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Yeah. Goodbye.
You've been listening to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, starring Josh Addison and Matthew R.X. Dentith, and produced by Matthew R.X. Dentith. If you've enjoyed the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, why not contribute to our Patreon or Podbean patron page? And you can contact us on podcastconspiracy@gmail.com. That's podcastconspiracy@gmail.com.
I'm gonna bet you're